guys, what's going on? It's Roth and Eric here with another episode of Dragons on the Wall. We're going to talk about the Dance of the Dragons, which is a little confusing title because it's from the book but slightly different. But anyway, we're going to talk about episode 9 of Game of Thrones season 5. Full spoilers. Are you ready? Let's go. Damn! I was gone for 2 weeks, came back, marathon the 3 episodes last night, and what?
And you were like, nothing happened.
Nothing happened.
It was just a very boring,
Nothing
uneventful.
happened at all.
Yeah. It was interesting because episode 9 now has this onus on it, right? Like, this is the one. And in fact, last year was the first time there was debate about that because it was all the battle at the wall. And there were some people that felt like it was just okay, you know, and that they had raised their game so much with episode 9 each season. And then this one also had a lot to live up to because it was coming off a huge, eventful episode that most everyone loved.
Yes.
So there was kind of and I did wonder in the first few scenes.
Can they top it?
Can they top it? Or are they going to try? I thought, you know, what if episode 9 is just an episode of Game of Thrones? Like maybe they very purposely didn't have anything big happen.
Yeah.
And then some big stuff happened.
Yeah. I mean, it's really funny because I actually had a similar question because I was watching it all in a row. And so I finished watching that huge battle and I was like, I don't know what you're doing in this next episode, but it better be amazing. I had an idea of what they might do, which was the last scene in the fighting pits, which is going to be a crowd pleaser because it's well done, dragon. But that's maybe not the biggest moment of the night.
It's not. I mean, you know, look, as far as moments that are impactful go, it's hard to beat, if that's the right word.
Child murder?
Murdering a poor, innocent, sweet little girl at the stake. I mean, that was rough. On a show that has already been like so merciless, taking out so many characters we love in horrible ways. This was a next level event because it was a sweet little girl who they'd actually worked hard to make sure was a full-fledged character on the show with many scenes and important relationships, especially with Davos. And it was her own dad sending her to her death.
And I think the key too is that not only had we become connected to Shireen, which they pointedly made sure we were, but we were connected to Stannis as well, and in a more significant way in the show, I think, than in the books. You know, I was watching that scene with like a big dude who's like works in horror movies, and he was destroyed. Because it was that scream and her pleas for her parents, and I think it was also her mother's last right there at the 11th. Well, it was the 13th hour. It was just too late. She tapped back into her motherhood. She'd always been so cruel to her. And then she suddenly realized this is way too far, no matter what we're after here. It was an incredible scene. I will say this, that I saw it coming in this sense. You know, once Melisandre was on about the royal blood, and we knew that, and she was the only one left available, and the show was pointedly making us attached to her in a very significant way through Davos, through Stannis. I was like, man, it's not going to turn out well for this little girl.
Yeah, I don't agree with some who say that it either came out of nowhere or that like Stannis would never do that. I think, look, this is a super stern guy that the show had to work hard this past year to make us start to feel warmer towards, which to their credit they did do. You know, we started to see more like, oh, I see where this guy is coming from, and he is the better choice and all this stuff. But we were introduced to him as this very harsh guy who would pointedly put this woman next to him that was, you know, whispering in his ear, and he already had killed his brother with a demon baby, guys, you know?
Yeah, with the smoke monster mirror baby. Also, he was burning people alive. Lest we forget, he and Melisandre have been very fond of this. You know? It's not like this is the first time.
This wasn't like, hey, this is a great idea. But I mean, again, I think it makes it worse that it wasn't easy choice for him. He's not, you know, it wasn't portrayed as like this guy feels nothing for this, and he did love her.
Absolutely.
And yet we talked before about how this season's kind of been about fanaticism and like kind of the religious sects are getting a lot more. That's sect, not sex. Getting a lot more focus here and kind of understanding what these different beliefs are. So yeah, here's a guy who does love his daughter, and yet he even more so is driven by this belief, I'm supposed to be in charge. There's a religious component to being in charge. and so I have to do this.
Well, in monarchical systems, there was always a religious component. Like they were ordained by God. Sometimes they were gods on earth. Like pharaohs and stuff, or they were ordained by God, right? So there was always kind of a religious component to most monarchs. But in this particular situation, I really actually think that Stannis is more driven by his need to be right. He really believes that is his right. And once he's decided something like that, there is no turning back for him. Melisandre, I think, is more driven by the belief that, hey, listen, if Stannis doesn't win and become the king, the whole world's going to die. Now, I know we don't have compassion for Melisandre. We don't.
Yeah.
But she believes that. And I think as a book reader, you feel that a little more. She really thinks that that's true, that it's either this little girl or everybody.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where she's coming from. But I think they very pointedly had that scene with Stannis and his daughter, a couple of episodes, where you really saw that there was a gentler side to him, one that could be loving and loyal. And that was shattered the way Valyrian steel shatters whites this week. And so were our hearts. I mean, do you think this was the most heartbreaking scene they've ever done?
Might be. Yeah, it might be. And it's funny. It's interesting. Something that's happened a lot this season because this has been, even by Game of Thrones terms, has been a very harsh season. And there's been a lot of debate about Game of Thrones this season and all these questions about, oh man, they're going so far. And it's not, there's always going to be people being like, what show do you think you signed on for? And want to be like, I'm hardcore. What do you think you're signing up for? Like, look, but at the end of the day, if you're feeling depressed by something, that can be, I can understand, like, I'm all in on Game of Thrones. I thought that was an excellent episode this week, but there are some people who are like, I can't keep watching a show that is this depressing.
Yeah, it's really...
Like, because it's like, is this entertaining to you? That's a decision that a lot of people have to make for themselves.
I agree. And that's really funny because we will have social questions, but a couple of them are about that question, like Christy Boston is like, I'd like you guys to talk about my feels and why GOT likes to hurt them.
Right.
And we agree. I mean, we're focusing here on this big event in terms of the sacrifice. We're going to talk about the show in a bigger way, of course, including dragons. Dragons! I loved it. I know some people are complaining about the VFX. It's a TV show, and he looked great. Anyway, we're going to talk about all that and more in our larger episode of our show. Tune back in for that. For now, let us know what you thought of the episode overall. Does it live up to the Ep9 hype? Did you like last week's better? And is this the most heartbreaking thing you've ever seen on Game of Thrones, or can that even be quantified?
And did you think Stannis had been motivated and like that had been set up that he would do this?
Do you think that this was an appropriate move for this character? Leave your comments below, and we'll see you in a little bit. Okay.
Or right now.
If you're still watching. Okay, so I know we want to move on to some other things, but I just sort of want to wrap this up. What you brought up about Stannis. One of the things that I think that is really interesting and great about what they've done is that we've talked about this before. This is a story about defying expectations, and I think even from book readers to show readers, I talked to some book readers who were like, I never really liked Stannis in the books, but I'm starting to think, hey, maybe why wouldn't he be the right leader? And here's why. And every time we think maybe this person is the best leader, I feel like something comes along to be like, not so fast, buddy.
Right. Actually, they're the worst person on earth.
Yeah. Well, because he made a decision to be driven by greed. And I think that, Dario had said to Daenerys, either leaders are the butcher or they're the meat. Very reminiscent of that one Walking Dead line, but whatever. But I think that a little bit these last couple of episodes have been about those impossible choices.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of people bring up, with Stannis, the people who are more critical of this choice were like, hey, but what about, he would never do that because she's his only legitimate heir, and what about the future? But I'm like, if he is that single-minded focused on I am supposed to be the leader, then he's not thinking about the future. It's not, and not that he would never think about that, but probably, Melisandre would be like, hey, that will work out. It's like, this is what needs to happen now. For both of them, for their own reasons. Like, this is what happens now. As far as the future, as far as lineage is concerned, that is another question that will be worked out. But, it's not like he, if he thinks this is the only way he will definitely become leader, then he'll do it, because it's not, he's already made the decision that he's willing to sacrifice this little girl that is dear to him. So as far as the lineage and as far as his legacy, that's a problem for another day.
Well, and that's the thing is chasing the fantasy of legacy, he burned alive his actual legacy.
Yeah.
And this is what's so interesting about, I think especially, and we'll talk about this later with the books. Of course I was horrified. Mm-hmm. Of course I think Stannis is evil. Of course he is now number one. Well, Ramsay.
He suddenly shot into the top 5.
He shot in the top 5 most hated characters on the show, right?
So good work, Stannis.
But the interesting thing is that at the same time, there's a piece of me that goes, I don't know if Melisandre's right.
Right.
What if the actual choice really was either we burn this little girl alive, or those White Walkers are getting in and everybody dies.
Right.
Like the world.
Yeah.
Not the world, but at least that world, that little corner of the world, Westeros.
Yeah.
What if that was actually the choice? Could you make that choice?
I don't know.
No, I mean really, I think that's the big question, because I think that's what they've made some changes from the books that I think are very specifically designed to create a cohesive theme. And that's it, which is the little girl, she comes in and she has this very sweet and innocent take on the story of the Dance of Dragons, of 2 siblings that are warring for a throne, that are so overtaken by power that thousands must die, right? Which is exactly what's happening. Thousands are dying because of these people fighting for this throne. The little people are getting crushed. And she says, well, let's choose no sides. But is that realistic? You have to make a choice in life.
What I'm curious about, because like we were saying, we're getting such a more bigger depiction of the religions and their beliefs and where they're coming from, would we dare, would they give us a definitive answer on, which is right? Especially because, look, we know that there is supernatural elements here for sure. We did see a demon smoke monster baby, actually appear. Renly actually was killed. Does that mean then we should believe that everything Melisandre believes is true? We don't know yet.
I don't think that we can, because the thing is is that Melisandre is still just one human. Right. And even if I don't think that this is going to be the case, but even if the Lord of Light was the Lord, that's not going to be it. I think, everything's going to work out in mysterious ways.
Morgan Freeman is the Lord of Light.
It's going to be Morgan Freeman, and that's how it ends.
That's amazing.
And so, because...
For years you've been playing my Game of Thrones. Sorry.
Okay. Over on the other side of the world, we have one of those priestesses saying, no, it's about Dany.
Yeah.
Right? So even if is delivering messages, they're very mixed messages.
Yes.
So I think even if there is a plan, it's not a plan that Melisandre knows how it really is all going to roll out.
Right.
Maybe this is one part of it. Stannis is one part of it, but she doesn't know the end game.
Yeah.
So but it is sort of interesting to me, because Shireen brings in that innocent perspective, but even then Dany has it a little bit when she's talking to Tyrion, and she's like, yeah, all of these families are sort of crushing the common man under your ever-moving wheel. I'm going to break that wheel. It's and Tyrion is like, are you?
Right.
Can you?
Is that a naive thought?
Yeah. How's that working out for you to be the leader when none of the rich people like you?
Yeah.
Well, we saw how that worked out. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, and so it's interesting, we were talking right before we started filming about, you kind of really did need that final sequence to end that episode on Shireen's death. Would have almost been too much. Even
Absolutely.
On their own terms, on how horrible this show has done, and ending on, some horrific things, it just was wow, that was such a gut punch. So you kind of needed a moment of triumph, even though it was amongst a lot of horrible things happening still. And even if it's unclear what Dany's next move is, to have Drogon appear there and, in that way, and in a much more sort of bigger, heroic, classical fantasy way than happens on this show.
Yeah.
It was great.
Well done, Drogon.
I will tell you, my wife was fist pumping. She was so excited, so hoping that's what was going to happen.
Yeah.
I said it was, they had their Attack of the Clones moment as they're all cornered. And Drogon played the part of Yoda and the clone troopers flying in to help there. And I'm not saying that everything in that sequence was perfect. And that you could kind of roll your eyes a little bit about the fact that when they were that outnumbered, they weren't just swarmed and killed immediately.
Yeah.
But it was a great moment that we needed. It was almost because things had gotten that dark. You kind of needed that big release.
I needed that big, like, yes, like exultant moment of celebrating this dragon and his love for his mama, which is, it played out a little more pointedly here, and their connection.
Yeah.
Because I think it was serving also, I know there's some people that, and I actually got a tweet, like, why were they throwing spears at the dragon but not at Daenerys? Fine, point taken.
Right.
Like, there's maybe some logical flaws happening, but dragon. And I think it looked good, especially for the budget they have, but also, like, the reality, the double bind that she was in, I think he calls it the knot of Marine. George R. R. Martin calls it the knot of Marine. But the double bind that she was in terms of having to prove Dario right and be a butcher in order to not be a butcher as a leader. I mean, at a certain point, I think she was like, metaphorically, screw it, I'm out of here. Like, I'm going off with my dragon. We right now don't know where she's going. Some people complain, like, why are you leaving them to die? It's a little more clear. I don't think it was entirely clear. She was assuming he was going to kill everybody.
Right.
Like, he was going to indiscriminately light everybody on fire.
And also, I do think that is what one would call a highly charged moment.
Yes.
When you wouldn't expect everyone to be in complete control of their, everything as far as, like, every decision you're making. So, he shows up, he saves her. He might die. Yeah. He's getting speared left and right. Or he might kill everyone. So let's just jump on the dragon and we'll work it out later. And we don't know what she's going to do next. I mean, she could next episode come back.
And be we had a nice ride.
Right. I worked some stuff out.
FYI, I have a dragon. You should really stop messing with me, lest let me remind you I have a dragon. But I think that Benioff, in the After the Show bit on HBO said, this also for Tyrion became a moment where he couldn't really maintain his cynicism 100%.
Right.
You don't watch somebody, a queen, fly off on her dragon and feel completely cynical.
Yeah.
You've never seen anything like that.
Yeah.
And
he was speechless for once.
I do have to say this, though, is that we see so much of this world through Tyrion's eyes, I think, because we relate to him so much. So if he now is becoming a true believer for Dany, I know that's not the answer. Right? Like, just knowing how George R. R. Martin writes.
Right.
That if we are really going to start believing that Dany's the answer, then she's not.
Right. Because next week isn't the finale, the final episode ever.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Of the people that we know as leaders now, obviously the two that are seem most integrous but have still done harsh things are Dany and Jon.
Yep. But Jon is a leader on a much smaller scale.
A much smaller scale. Yeah. He has different, in a way, less complicated choices to make.
Right.
But they've become increasingly complicated, right? Like, trying to bind these two groups together that have been enemies forever for the common good is not something people are going to like.
Yeah, and there was that line, I'm forgetting the character's name now, but his sort of rival to be the commander, who said something about, something like, he said a line about, it's very noble how you're trying to do the right thing.
It's going to get us all killed.
Get us all killed, which is kind of the message of Game of Thrones going back to Ned Stark, is like trying in this world, trying to do just, completely the pious, noble thing is not a great idea and can lead to bad things.
It can lead to bad things, but also I think in Jon's case, it's not necessarily that it is going to get them all killed. It's that their prejudice is going to get them all killed. Is that if they would just listen to him and be reasonable, he's actually right.
Yeah.
He's completely right. They're going to get them all killed with their sort of embedded hatred. And at a certain point, you have to decide if you're going to give that up or hang on to it. Heavy wears the crown.
He did bring a giant
home. He did bring a giant home.
Yes.
So y'all better
I wish he was like,
shut up.
Did you see the
Did you see the giant?
It's amazing.
I know. Get you killed. I got a giant, buddy.
That's right.
Yeah, it's, it's funny because in Dorne, and we'll talk about Dorne a little bit more in a minute and whether that story is really working. But they did choose to make a political move, right?
Yeah.
Like, he was like, let's keep this alliance going despite our egos and all these other things, which, given what we've seen happening elsewhere, seems like the better option.
Yeah.
Rather than to have a revenge war. We see how well that's working out
Yeah, it did not
for
work.
everybody else.
Yeah.
Including Cersei, who let her ego sort of.
Yeah, she sort of outwitted herself.
She outwitted herself because she wasn't willing to keep the alliance with the Tyrells if they were going to insult her. And now look at her.
Yeah, and now look. By who she made an alliance with, it was her own undoing. Yeah.
Let's talk about Arya, because this is also, we'll talk about what's shifted around there for her a little bit in a minute, but she also is sort of faced with that kind of a choice, right? Like, she can either seek revenge or she can do what's best for the city that she's now in.
Right, because she's on this new path and she's learning this new thing, but she was very explicitly told to leave behind her old life. And so when, a piece of her old life comes back in, a piece that she wants revenge on.
Let's talk about who she wants revenge on in case folks don't remember.
Yeah,
him.
And that's a hard thing on this show. So Meryn Trant, am I saying his last name right? I don't know. Again, this is a show with 10,000 characters, some of whom really disappear into the background for a long time. And so, actually my wife was like, wait, is that guy on her list? When she was looking at him, because it's been a while. He's been around since the beginning, but it's been a while since he's done anything prominent. And his big claims to fame, the one that Arya wants to kill him for, is that he killed Syrio.
Right. Who was her sword mentor trainer.
His other big moment, by the way, was
presumably.
Yeah. His other big moment is when Joffrey had Sansa stripped naked and beaten. He's the one who was punching Sansa.
Yeah, he was punching Sansa.
And didn't seem to care at all.
They
didn't give him the I feel bad about doing this.
He's done a lot of squirrely, terrible things.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not a nice character. And then they're like, just to really bring this home in case you forgot what an a-hole this guy is, he's a pedophile.
Yeah, he's horrible and awful. Yeah.
So she has every reason, and we have every reason to want her to kill this guy. But if she does that and she sort of turns her back on the vow she's now taken, what does that say about her integrity? Because also her target, the person she's supposed to kill, is really hurting people in the city.
Yeah.
And she would be doing the city a service to kill him,
Why not
presumably.
kill them both?
Why not kill everyone?
To me, I just see
She's 11, by the way, in the book.
But no, I'm just saying, why not kill this horrible guy that she's been tasked with killing, and then moonlight and kill the horrible guy that she wants revenge on?
Because the point is the choice, Eric. She only has one vial of poison. I mean, she could kill him in many other ways. She could go dig needle up.
Yeah.
But the point is she going to keep her vow or not?
Right. I do think this story has been a bit mixed this season, and it's gotten a little, especially given that I love Arya so much, she's such a great character. I do think there's been a little bit problem of momentum, and it's gotten a little murky in the middle. And I almost do hope that is her solution. He wants her to leave behind her identity, but that's not realistic, honestly. I mean, honest people do, I know, but it doesn't seem realistic for her and someone that driven.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to see her in the long term being like, I'm just going to let this go and let all these people who horribly killed my family and the people I love.
It's not her personality.
Yeah.
It's just, there's nobody on the show that has been more driven to rectify. I mean, if anything, John's let go of his identity. It's one of the reasons we root for Arya so much, by the way, is because on a show that's been all about horrible things happening to people we love, she's one of the few, maybe the only one that is that goal-oriented on revenge and getting these people who did this horrible stuff. Yeah, like you said, John has made a vow. He is sticking with his vow. He is, and he could have turned back and become a Stark again, and he could, become a Stark at all, and sought revenge. Or sought to reclaim his family name.
Years ago, he could have gone and helped Robb,
but he didn't.
Right.
He has let go of his identity. Sansa's somewhere in the middle right now.
Yeah.
But Arya's the one. She's like, oh no, I got a list.
Right.
And I'm not going to forget because I'm going to repeat it every night. You just made you don't want to make that list.
No. And so it's hard for me to see, and I don't think in the long term she can be true to these vows because I think she is who she is.
I think she is who she is. I think she went there to learn how to become an assassin so she could fulfill her goal. But yeah, it's going to be interesting because as we know in the world of Game of Thrones,
there are consequences.
There are consequences.
Do you think he was looking at her because he's like, I kind of recognize you, or because he's pervert creep, and he's like, oh, an underage girl?
I thought it was a little of both.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought he was like, it was that moment, when you see somebody and you get that tingle of recognition, but you're not sure who they are. So it's like that feeling, but add to that pedophilia.
He's a big perv? Yeah.
Yeah, so it was a mixture.
Yeah, he got to die.
Of those things. He's got to die. I mean, that's the thing, right? Like, and I think that the show is setting us up as the audience to feel that too, like, oh, you got to go.
Right.
Yeah, but it always does raise those interesting questions. It's like, it was so shattering to watch that little girl burn, and then you're like, I watched loads of people burn on the beach.
Yeah. But it is about that personal investment.
Yeah.
I mean, it was also awful to watch that girl be forced to go have sex with this guy, and yet not as awful as Sansa because just the like personal connection of like the full character. Yeah. And the show does kind of play with you in that way because it'll remind you and like, oh yeah, like we were talking about with Stannis. It's like, he's actually done this a lot. But he hasn't done this with someone we were that invested in, you know? So.
I want to talk about Dorne.
Yeah.
Dorne has been one of the things that fans, including myself and I think yourself, have found kind of problematic this season. It hasn't really worked, I don't think. Let's talk. I think that, honestly, and Matt, I think, brought some of this up in his review, it really comes down to, for me, the stakes just aren't there.
Yeah.
And they're there and then they're gone very quickly. It's like they built up like, we're gonna, and a little bit this is from the source material. They've truncated things, they've shifted things around to keep central characters in play.
Yeah.
But as a result, a big chunk of that storyline was lost that's in the book. And what remains has felt toothless.
Yeah, Dorne was something, I think a lot of us were actually really excited about, and you and I and Matt and a lot of people read the books, and I liked the idea of putting Bronn and Jaime into the story. But I don't know, it just hasn't really had a lot of heft to it on a show that's known for danger can come at you at any time. It felt oddly subdued, and even though there's been some action scenes, even those haven't all really worked.
They haven't, and it's an odd thing where it's been problem, easy solution.
Yeah. Relatively
easy solution. Bronn is poisoned, here's an antidote. The only price for this is you have to look at my gorgeous naked body.
Right.
That was like the weirdest, like I will punish you with my beauty and then give you the antidote immediately. I can't tell why she wanted to help him.
Yeah.
And she thought he was cute.
I don't know. They're not, it's not being fully fleshed out. And it was very strange in this week's episode with they're going to let Bronn go, but there'll be a price. And then it was just you have to take a punch.
Yeah.
And it was oddly goofy for Game of Thrones.
Very goofy. Yeah. They sort of giggled about it, and then they very quickly came to a diplomatic resolution. I mean, this is how you want things to go in the real world, like
right.
Sit around and come to a reasonable diplomatic solution, but not in Game of Thrones. Like, okay, I'm going to send I'm going to give you what you want.
Yeah.
I'm just going to send my kid back to you, and we'll keep our alliance.
Yeah, that was all really weird. And going back to that part when he got punched, it was played like it would be a big deal. Like the scene, by having the scene end and going back to him in his cell and him freed, I had this idea that maybe it was because they knew what a depressing episode this was going to be with the Shireen stuff, that even with the Dany stuff at the end, they needed to have, I think that was their attempt at levity that just didn't hit the mark.
Yeah, I think it didn't entirely hit the mark either.
And I just wish that storyline overall had more weight, but unfortunately it's been, you kind of go back to the Dorne scenes this season, and you're kind of like, all right. And hopefully it looks like it's over, right? Because like you said, they kind of came to everyone agreed, and all right, Marcella's going back. And hopefully once they go back to King's Landing, where there's a lot going on, a lot of intense stuff going on, I want Jaime to be back in a more interesting storyline.
I do too, unless they're sort of like making some big twist or adding some elements from the book that we haven't seen yet. I think that'll be it. I know we had a wrap soon. I do want to just talk about, take one or two social questions.
Yeah.
Darren Buck is, who's rooting for Brienne to kill Stannis more and more now? Well, yeah.
I think everyone.
All of us, right? Like, don't you? I cannot wait for that to happen. I don't know that will happen.
We don't know either. Stannis could, and now maybe he just solidified himself as sitting on the throne at the end.
He might win this game,
But we were joking earlier about the fact that you may have seen, maybe not, but you should look for on IGN. Matt Fowler wrote a feature this past week that was basically like who's left to hate on Game of Thrones, taking into account that a lot of our big villains had either died or started to be redeemed. Like Jaime used to be a villain on the show, and then he got a lot of redemption. And Matt didn't include Stannis on the list of who's left to hate because of this season.
Now he just shot way
and then wrote in his review, well, guess what? He just,
Well done, writers, on that one.
And well done, Stannis. You're back in the hate.
Back in the hate train.
I think the answer is everyone.
Yeah. This is interesting. Just really quickly, I'm going to get your thoughts on this. And you touched on this before. Tyler Rogers says, he wants us to talk about the growing discontent with the show. I think it will end happily. But is it worth all the sadness so far? No, I'm just going to say really quickly, I don't think that we're going to get a typical happy ending on this series. I don't necessarily think it'll be like full-scale apocalypse by the end of it. But I think that George R. R. Martin set out very specifically not to write your typical A, B, C, following a very formulaic narrative, ending with a happy ending tale. That's not what we're going to get. We're going to get a surprise ending. Maybe it'll be bittersweet. I don't think it'll be ultimately happy.
I think bittersweet's the word I would go to, too, because I don't think it will be the everyone dies ending, and I don't think it'll be the White Walkers overrun everyone, and that's it. There will be, someone of some nobility, nobility not in their lineage, but of someone that we have some respect for, I think, leading, and there will be some triumphs, but it will certainly be bittersweet, not just in the terms of there will be death and sacrifice, because we're 5 years in and we've seen plenty, but in terms of what do they have to give up of themselves, of the fact that you can't have it all in a very big way.
These are hard choices, and that's what we see over and over again, and sacrifice happens, not literal. Figurative sacrifice happens, sometimes literal sacrifice happens. Is it too depressing to watch? Not for me. I think this is great character work, and it does create pain, but there's moments of exaltant moments too. And I do think it's very much worth still watching.
Not for me either, but I understand that it's pushed it pretty far, especially this season, to a point where I can understand if someone's like, this is really depressing. This isn't what I look for weekly TV. And it's not, everything isn't extremes. So me saying that isn't like, you should be watching some stupid sitcom. It's like, no, it's like, I think people knew that this was going to be a, dark, complex show. But, when you see a guy, kill his sweet little girl, it can be a little much for you. That being said, I'm all in, but I do think, we've talked a lot about how we think Benioff and Weiss are looking towards the end more than ever and want to wrap this show up in the next couple of years.
They're driving us there.
Yeah, and I think that they know too, we're now shifting to a point that it's time to start aiming towards the end game.
Yeah. Okay, so that brings us to my very final thing. I know we got to wrap it up. There's lots to talk about. Will Dany get grayscale? He touched her. I don't think she will. Where is she heading with her?
She can survive fire.
Yeah. Where is she heading with that dragon? We will find out. But here's one thing is that during the Inside the Episode on HBO, I think it was Benioff, revealed that George R. R. Martin, this is a book spoiler.
Oh yeah. So book spoiler part. So if you want to stop watching.
Okay, so I should say that off the bat. Warning, we're about to do one quick book spoiler here. But this is to say that during the Inside the Episode portion of episode 9 on HBO, Benioff revealed that George R. R. Martin had told him that Shireen was set to get burned alive in a similar sacrifice in the books. Now, where the characters are in the book, Melisandre's back. Physically, they're not together. Stannis is off.
Stannis has gone to attack the Boltons, but he didn't bring any of those people with him.
He didn't bring any of those people with him. Davos is off on a whole other mission trying to rally the Northerners to Stannis' cause, if I could speak. Melisandre and Shireen are back at Castle Black.
Yeah.
So there are some theories about how that could happen. Does she send him a raven and say, I'm going to do this? Do you agree? And he says yes, out of desperation. Is he backed into a corner? Does she decide on her own?
Right. Which would actually be very different as far as the weight of it.
Because the weight of it was about Stannis making the decision in this book. We are now at the point, and they've talked about this in more ways than one. We saw this last week. The show is definitely spoiling the books.
Yeah.
Things that are happening in the show are happening before they happen in the book. And obviously they are of significance. So I have to imagine that Stannis would in some way be culpable in the books as well. Otherwise, it's a very different story.
I believe so too. And because already, obviously this season more than ever has changed things from the books and given storylines different characters or switched characters around. But we've known for a while that they sat down, Benioff and Weiss, with Martin quite a while ago, and he kind of laid out where all the characters end up.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting, to hear him say, it was Benioff, right? Mm-hmm. Him directly say that when George told us this, because it's like, no, this is a definite spoiling the book, not going in their own route, even though it's happening differently, but being like, there's a book coming up. In the 6th or 7th book, it sounds like Shireen will die.
Yeah.
And that Stannis will probably make that decision to sacrifice her for what he needs to happen.
For his goals.
Yeah. And so, it's
which also means Stannis is still around for a while.
Yeah, which also means Stannis is around for a while. And it's just kind of fascinating. We've already talked about, on one hand, there is kind of the strange interestingness here because there were some people that, were frankly like maliciously getting off on spoiling events of the show for people who hadn't read the books, and you're horrible people, and I understand you. But now it is now the books are being spoiled. If you choose to watch this TV show, you are going to see these big events, and that's just kind of where we are. There's no getting around that unless they were never realistically going to pause the TV show and be like, George, finish the books
for the next 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's certainly very interesting. It's becoming a more and more evolving sort of interplay between these two worlds.
Yeah.
It's fun as a fan for me to see how it's evolving differently and the same, and where it's going to be ultimately heading. But what do you guys think? What did you think of this episode? What do you think of the season so far? Are you more happy towards the end of the season? We're going to be back next week for the season finale for probably a bigger, better episode.
Maybe not better, but we'll see.
Well, this one's good too. We hope. With Joshua, and we'll talk about all these things and more. Tweet us your questions, leave it in comments. Keep it here for Dragons and Walls and Game of Thrones.